Gulwali, I'd imagine when you heard this news yesterday and you saw the story about this awful situation where these people are desperately trying to get into the UK, dead in the back of a refrigerated lorry, it brought back a lot of memories for you. Because actually, that is how you arrived in the UK eventually. We'll get to that point. Just explain a little bit what it was that your mum decided she had to get you out of Afghanistan and that journey that you took.
To be honest, I had a very difficult 24 hours. I'm still in shock. I had very little sleep, and it's personal to me. It's heartbreaking what has happened. It should not have happened. It was preventable. We could have had a policy in place where we save lives rather than force people to have to make such a risky journeys. And so, I mean, I made this journey 12 years ago as a child.
But there was also pressure from the Taliban for you and your brother to get involved.
Indeed, to become fighters and to get involved in the war and to take revenge for our family members who were killed by the US forces, but also to fight a so-called holy war, which definitely we would have been killed along the process. So my mother saved us, but she also lost us in some ways.
I mean, she could utterly understand why she'd want to get you out. That motivation is understandable. But what did she know of what you were going to go through, and what did you know? What was explained to her?
Very little was explained to me, and I doubt she knew very much. She just hoped that it was better for us to be out of Afghanistan and to hope that we will be welcomed somewhere and treated humanely and with some sort of dignity and respect. And I mean, she had no idea what we went through, me and my brother, the journeys that we had across half of the world. And
she was duped? We'll get him out, it'll be fine. She wouldn't have known that you
No, she wouldn't have known the risks. I mean,
lorry,
yeah, I mean, that was up to literally at the end of my journey. I went through the Mediterranean. I saw deaths on many occasions. And there were times I was angry at her decision and my family decision overall. But I kind of saw the point why they were doing this. And I think, again, mother and family are faced with extraordinary circumstances. They don't want their children to die in front of them or to be involved in a war zone or to be... I mean, we had... Recently, the Save the Children report was out. You know, there's almost every child born in Afghanistan have known nothing but war. And that's the sad reality of the situation.
So you managed to get yourself to the edge of the continent, and the plan was always for you to try and get to the UK?
No.
It wasn't?
So I would have, because people said to me, you know, you traveled through 10 countries, why didn't you stay there? I would have stayed anywhere where I was welcomed. I was in prison almost in every country. And also, one of the reasons I come to the UK is because I found out that my brother, who was supposed to travel with me, we were separated, and he was heading for the UK. So that's when I decided to come to Britain to find him. If I was able to claim asylum for Britain in France or in another third country, if I go into a British embassy and consulate and apply for some sort of humanitarian visas, or if I was able to come through like a safer route through, we got some young people from Calais under the Dobbs Amendment, which was possible. If there was a civilized in ways that people could come, you know, have a safe passage, then I wouldn't have risked my life. I wouldn't have been in that container. So I think ultimately, I mean, we heard some nice words from the Prime Minister, but the government really needs to take action and have, you know, let go of this hostile environment, because it's loss of lives. It's not one life is too many. I think 39 is absolutely, like, I don't know what their family are thinking. It's
hard.
Really,
I mean, the reality
difficult.
is the family won't know yet.
Exactly, but they will be even more limbo because they will not know if their sons or brothers are alive or not. I mean, it's tough. Like,
it's heartbreaking.
It's just, you know, my thoughts and prayer goes out to the families.
Wensley, you've written a book specifically about the crossing. Tell us about that.
Well, there is a new criminal underworld out there in England. It's Brexit tainted, and by that I mean, and this is the worst thing, not the worst thing. What happened yesterday was appalling. Every aspect of it is appalling and really tragic. And the fact that these families, somewhere in Britain, are loads of families waiting to meet their loved ones. And they've just disappeared. And I have to say, in many other instances, I bet they literally disappear. In other words, these lorries are not found with the bodies. When people die, the smugglers get rid of the bodies. So these people are left without any closure, these relatives, which is awful in itself. But we're talking about a situation where recently there's been a surge because a lot of smugglers are cynically using Brexit and the so-called deal that we're about to sign or not sign as a reason to rush more people over. It's the most cynical way to deal with it, and it's been used as a marketing device almost by smugglers, isn't it?
I think you'd have to be made of stone not to be moved by what happened yesterday and also what you say you went through. But there will be some people that say you don't have to make the journey if everyone that wanted asylum to get away from it. There are wars all over the world, there's starvation, there's troubles everywhere. If everyone that wanted to come to a country that didn't have that moved, the whole world would be moving.
That's
What
not a
would
very
you
good.
say
That's
to
not a
them?
very good argument. I mean, it's about human cost, and we should be saving lives. We have a moral and legal obligation to people. I mean, there are 70 million displaced people in the world. About 25 million are refugees, and half of them are children. And we ought to be doing more. Not everyone wants to come to the UK. There's a very small percentage of people who wants to come to the UK. We can deal with it in a civilized and humane way. In Calais, in France, I mean, why should we expect Greece and Italy to take the burden in other European states? So we ought to be leading in this humanitarian crisis. You know, people look up to us, and I think we are not taking the responsibility seriously as a nation. We have historical responsibility, and we have, you know, social and political responsibility to deal with this crisis. And also, not to mention, we got involved in those places militarily. You know, Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, and elsewhere in Africa, we have intervened, and we ought to have the, you know, the guts to actually take some responsibility for our
We're
actions.
supposed to be so good at law enforcement and everything else.
Human
We're
rights
not. And human rights and everything. Purfleet was a weak spot. It was a classic targeted port, small port, which was perfect for people smuggling. And the authorities just hadn't cracked down on that. There are many examples of that all over Britain. There are lots of people, innocent people, turning up in these sort of situations